Hello, I am ColorBot. You have chosen the How To module. User level, everyone. Prepared to learn. Few things speak directly to the soul like color. Colors have the ability to drive emotion and influence our everyday decisions. Slight changes in tone, value, and saturation can make all the difference in the world and totally transform a scene in the blink of an eye.
As a designer, color is one of the most powerful tools in your design arsenal, and its mastery is essential for creating compositions that compel the senses and engage the viewer. Successfully utilizing color in your compositions takes a little more work than picking colors that look pretty together. It is not, however, rocket science. Don't let curmudgeons with degrees scare you away from experimenting with color in your compositions. You are just as qualified as they are to take a critical approach to design, and with a few simple tips, you will be well on your way to creating great palettes that rival some of the best work found in print or on the web. Rarely when you go on a picnic do you find dishes that have more than a few ingredients. Experienced picnickers and chefs alike know that flavors should harmonize with each other rather than compete. After all, in a dish with 100 ingredients, how can you hope to fully appreciate any one component? As the picnicker is aware of what they pack in their basket, so too must the designer be with their color choices. Every building, every picnic, every composition must be built on a strong foundation upon which everything else is structured. The foundation, or background elements of your composition, typically take the form of elements that present a solid field of color. Dark, light, or anything in between, any color can be used as a background element so long as it presents a stable base for the rest of your composition. Here we see a website using neutral gray for their background. Notice how it lets the content come to the forefront and nothing is competing for your attention. Let's now take a look at a website that uses a high saturation background. In this example, the background is pretty loud, yet it is still in harmony with the rest of the composition and lets the main content shine through. Returning to our picnic, we can see that this bright tablecloth presents a uniform field of color that will serve well as our foundation. This is the perfect time to bring up the topic of main components. Main components are the content areas of your composition, the text fields of your websites, the subjects of your photographs, or in this case, the plates on our table. You should think of your main components as vessels for delivering your message. Take a look at this photograph. Notice how the subject's face is doing all the work to deliver the message of anger that the photographer is trying to capture. As designers, we often have to face situations where there is more information than room to effectively display it. Unfortunately, a composition with just main components is pretty boring, if not downright unmanageable. Believe it or not, our job all comes down to biology in the end. The human eye has the unique ability to scan a situation and cover a lot of ground quickly. This is both good and bad. On one hand, it has served us well over the years as a way to avoid danger. On the other hand, it makes our job as designers that much more difficult. Capturing and focusing the attention of the eye is no easy task. Fortunately, this is where highlights come in to save the day. Since our food has arrived, let's take a closer look to understand this concept. Here we have all the basics you need for a great picnic, but something is wrong. I know the food is delicious, but it doesn't look very good. Notice how everything seems to blend into each other. The hot dog runs into the baked beans, the fruit salad is fairly uninspired, and I'd have to be awfully thirsty to drink that water. Instead of tossing the whole mess and starting over, let's judiciously add a few highlights to our picnic and see if this meal can't be saved. A few berries, the prerequisite ketchup and mustard, and of course a slice of lemon for the water, and there you have it. Our picnic actually stands a chance of getting eaten by people instead of the dog. So we know that the background, the main, and the highlight colors all must be chosen first when creating our palette. How, though, do you go about choosing your colors in the first place? This is where the color wheel comes into play. The color wheel is an easy way to look at the entire spectrum of color and examine the relationship of one color to another. A simple two-dimensional color wheel can be used to look at the relationships between two different hues of color. Using this 12-spoke color wheel, we can create palettes known as analogous palettes, where we pick a main color and then choose the color immediately to the right and immediately to the left to create our palette. Using the same 12-spoke wheel, we can create additional palettes like complementary, split complementary, double complementary, and triadic. By adding another dimension to our color wheel, we are able to introduce additional variations to our palettes by changing the tint and shade of our colors. So while our 12-spoke wheel may have seemed a little restrictive, you can now see that there is an amazing amount of variety available with these simple palette guidelines. By introducing one more dimension to our color wheel, we can change the saturation of our colors and introduce even more variety. In fact, by including saturation in our color wheel, we can create an entirely new palette known as monochromatic, where we take different saturation levels of the same hue and use them all in a composition. It's important to understand that these color palette guidelines are not the end-all and be-all of design. Rather, they are a great jumping-off point to get you started on creating your own custom color palettes. Consider this palette. It's 3 shades of gray and a very vibrant red. It doesn't follow any of our palette guidelines, yet it's quite striking and creates a highly organized scene. Don't be afraid to experiment with your color palettes and see what happens. Now that we know how to go about choosing colors that work well together, how do we choose where to get started? After all, every palette must have an inspiration on which the other colors are chosen. Where should your inspiration come from? Life does not always provide a great source of inspiration to work from. Rarely does a beauty like the Mona Lisa drop on our doorstep to provide inspiration for that hair dye ad we've been working on. In this case, it's time to look at the psychology of color and how to best choose the colors you need for your application. To make this a bit easier, let's break all colors down into 3 categories: warm, neutral, and cool. Now your warm colors are going to be reds, yellows, and any combination of the two like orange. Effectively, this is half of our color wheel. Warm colors are associated with energy and heat. Let's look at red. In Western cultures, you see red being used to represent violence, warfare, hell, things like that. Yet paradoxically, it is the color of choice for one of our most romantic holidays, and the color our stars walk on their way to award shows. The real message here is that you can't use a color to deliver your message verbatim. Rather, you must use it to deliver the emotion behind your message. War, love, violence, these are all passionate emotions. And if you think your composition needs a little passion, a little fire in the belly, consider using red or any of the other warm colors as a jumping-off point. While it's true the other warm colors generate different emotional responses than red, make no mistake, they can all impart passion and life into your composition. Now let's switch gears a bit, spin the color wheel around about 180 degrees, and examine the cool colors. When we examine the other half of our color wheel and look at everything between green and purple, we will find our cool colors. These colors are more subdued than their warm counterparts, and are typically used to impart emotions of maturity, calm, and mystery. The tint, shade, and saturation of cool colors are critical to making sure your emotional message is on point. While a warm color like red will always impart a bit of fire and vibrance to a composition regardless of the specifics, the cool colors can be a bit more tricky to work with. Let's take a look at purple. Here we see purple being used to create a very dignified composition that evokes emotions of majesty. Let's change the tint, shade, and saturation a bit and see what happens. Our purple has gone from royalty to punk. And to take things even a step farther, we can change it up a bit more and get a lavender color that would sell heroic amounts of fabric softener. Cool colors are the tricksters of the color wheel. Every time you think you have them figured out, they do something surprising and can be used in new and clever ways. Our last stop on the color wheel is the neutrals. Well, not exactly. The primary neutral colors are black, white, and all the shades of gray. Thus, we're going to have to deviate from our color wheel a bit and take a look at this section instead. On the right we have black. Traditionally, this was a color associated with death and mystery, but these days it's more common to see black being used to impart a feeling of modernism. Whatever the case, Black makes a fantastic background color for just about any other color. Now on the left we have white. Much like black, white can be used as a neutral background with just about any other color. Though when we take white beyond the realm of background color and use it in our compositions, it evokes feelings of purity and cleanliness. The white of a wedding dress, fresh ceramic tile, you get the idea. Now between the two we have gray. Gray can be formal, modern, punky, fun, just about anything you as the designer want it to be. Depending on its place in the black-white spectrum, gray can be used as a replacement for either black or white in your compositions. Unfortunately, this is where the neutral colors get a bit tricky. You see, most neutral colors don't actually exist in nature, so they can look very sterile. When was the last time you saw a gray rock that was exactly 50% white and 50% black? Instead, most neutral colors deviate a little bit from the party line and include bits of other color to help spice things up. A touch of blue can make this gray very cool, while subtracting the blue and adding the same amount of yellow can make it warm. To further complicate this neutral color business, brown is typically thrown into the mix as a neutral color. Now you may be thinking to yourself, brown exists on the color wheel among the warm colors. Well, not exactly. Go ahead and try to find it. I'll even expand this color wheel a bit to show some more variations. Still nothing? Don't worry, you didn't miss it. Brown just happens to be an interesting color that is composed of all three primary colors. So while brown can be made from the colors on the wheel, it does not actually exist on it. And since we have to classify all the colors, we may as well toss brown in with the neutrals. Plus it makes a nice background color. So at the end of all this, what's the takeaway? After all this talk of shade, tint, hue, warm, cool brown, what's the point? Well, the point is that colors exist for you as the designer to play with. They are much more than a tool or a means to an end. They are a unique form of expression. They are a way of observing and interacting with the world that is your very own. The color wheel, the neutral spectrum, and yes, even brown, give you everything you need to drive emotion and create one-of-a-kind compositions that speak to people in a voice that only color can create.